values are passed from the calling statement to the function using variables or values we refer to as arguments or parameters. So in this example, I have a function called squareIt, and it has a variable called myValue inside the parentheses, and that is known as a parameter. And then the code for that function is squared equals myValue times myValue and return squared. The code then that calls that, I have a variable called x equals 5, and then y equals squareIt, and in parentheses I have the value x, which would be 5. That value x, or it could be a literal number such as 5, would be known as the argument. When I call that function, I pass it whatever value is in the parentheses as the argument to the value of the variable that is the parameter. And so my value takes on a value of 5. And squared then would equal 5 times 5, or 25, and it would return the value of squared, 25, which would then be assigned to the value of y, and if we print y, we would get the value 25 printed. It's also important to note that the parameter and any variables inside the function are local to that function. They have a local scope. And so if I tried to print squared in my code outside of that function, I would get an error because squared does not exist, nor does my value outside of that function. I cannot reference those variables unless we made them global, and we'll talk about that in another video. Now, the number of arguments that are being passed and the number of parameters that are receiving those passed values must be the same. They must be the same in number, and in most languages the same in type. Python's a little more forgiving in the type than other languages such as C# or Swift or Java. But what we don't want to do here is pass a string to myValue and then try to use myValue as an integer when it contains a string value. So we really want these both to be integers, or maybe both to be floats, or treated that way. So here's another example where I have a definition called getInitials, and it's receiving 3 parameters of last, first, and middle. And in the code, I have initials equals, and I'm going to take the first character of the variable called first, the first character of the variable called middle, and the first character of the variable called last, concatenate those together and take the uppercase value of those, and return then that value of initials. So it's important to recognize here that last, first, and middle are all string values. And then here's my code that calls that. I have a first name, a middle name, and a last name variable consisting of Elvis, Aaron, and Presley. And then ABC equals getInitials, and I'm passing last name, the value of last name would be Presley, the value of first name would be Elvis, and the value of middle name, which would be Aaron. Now it's important that these follow the same order, because last name will go into last, first name will go into first, and middle name will go into middle. And so the result that's returned then would be EAP. But if I change the order and I pass getInitials first name, comma, middle name, last name, well, Elvis will go into the value of last, Aaron will go into the value of first, and Presley would go into the value of middle. And the result would be that I would get APE as the initials rather than EAP. So the order is critical, the type is critical, and the number is critical. They have to match. So as another example, if I tried to pass last name and first name to getInitials, I would end up with an error because getInitials, the function, is expecting 3 arguments to be passed into the 3 parameters. And here I'm only doing 2. And then finally, I don't have to pass variables. I can pass literal values from my calling statement to the function. So in this case, I've got ABC equals getInitials of Smith, John, and William, and the value that would be returned back to ABC would be JWS. I could also pass a mixture of variables and literal values. So here, getInitials, I'm passing a literal string of Smith, the variable first name, and the middle name of William, and the result then would be EWS, would be the initials. That would be returned into ABC. So one last thing, the value that's returned, in this case it's a string, has to be in coordination or aligned to the variable data type. So ABC then is also a string. Well, that's how we pass values between a calling statement and a function. If you just jumped into this video and haven't seen the prior videos to this, I invite you to check out my Python playlist of videos. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos that I create, you can click my picture up in the top right and subscribe to the channel.